Our guest today, pause. Wait, Nicole Maxali, right? Maxali. I
It's
wrote
fine.
it down. I was like, say it right.
I know it's hard because of the X.
What's up, fam? It's your host, Cindy Chu. Welcome back to Creative Queens Podcast. We're recording this episode with listening party inside Canal Street Radio. I want to welcome our guest today, Nicole Maxali, creator, producer, and actress of Good Vibes series, which premiered at Asian American International Film Festival last year. She's a Queens-based San Francisco native. She was also a stand-up comedian and opened for comic geniuses like Dave Chappelle, and later began writing, producing, and performing solo shows under the tutelage of W. Kamau Bell. I'm going to hand it over to Nicole if you want to add anything else.
I mean, I do a lot of things, but yes, as far as entertainment-wise goes, that's about the gist of it, yes.
What about non-entertainment wise?
I also do a manifesting magic course online, and I also teach improv now at Metadent in Brooklyn.
Oh, damn. That's cool. Did you start the improv classes, or have you been teaching for a while?
No, I just started it a couple of months ago, like 4 months ago, late last year, and it's a space for POC folks and queer folks who need a space to like heal, an incubator healing space.
Yeah.
So they do other stuff like Reiki and massage and...
What's Reiki?
So Reiki is the Japanese... No, it's a good question. It's the Japanese... it's like energy healing work.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so...
So you do that in every class?
So I do improv. No, that's a class that they have available on other nights.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is a cool improv class.
No. We just do straight like theater games and acting basics and improv.
Because I know you do a lot of other things too, like we just talked about. So what inspired you to do the improv class?
So I was going to Metadent. It's also a co-working space during the day. So if y'all folks need a co-working space in Brooklyn, it's in Bushwick. But I was going there for a couple of months, almost a year, and they also hold rehearsals for some of the shows that I'm in. I'm also in a play called Raise Panay this year. Yeah, so
cool.
We have our rehearsals there, and so I met the folks that own it, and I was talking with them, and I told them, you know, I've done improv in all these other spaces like Magnet, UCB, and I honestly kind of felt not safe in a lot of these spaces. It was about 6-7 years ago when I was like hardcore in the improv scene in New York, and I was like, I would love to teach a course or class for POC folks that want to do improv, that have never done improv before.
Yeah. Because I've been to Magnet, so I know what you're talking about. Yeah. So like I'm also curious like what you thought could have been safer about it, and how do you think that you create the space for POC then in these classes?
Sure, good question. So a lot of the classes that I took, and of course there are some that were fine and I never experienced anything unsafe, but especially one class, and I think it was like improv level 3 or 4, which was very surprising to me. One of the other classmates, he was an older white cis gentleman, and he would constantly make all the females either his mistresses or his maids, or, you know, if they were Asian, like a masseuse. It was just blatantly racist and sexist.
Yeah.
And so all the women in that class just never wanted to get up and partner with him if he like stood up, and we would always cringe at his choices.
Did the
teacher didn't say anything?
That's crazy.
And we would like kind of loudly be vocal about like, ugh, you know, and not laugh. And still the teacher wouldn't say anything. And so that experience, and then I also took a sketch class, and I did a sketch about Katy Perry and how she kind of uses cultural appropriation in a lot of her videos.
I've seen
her Grammy and American Music Awards, where she like dressed up like a geisha and all that stuff.
Yeah. And
I kind of made fun of it in this sketch, and the woman teaching the class was just like, "Oh, this is too much."
Really?
Yeah. And I was like, "Well,
that's too much.
This is what comedy's for, is to like really call people out on like the crazy stuff they do, right?
Yeah,
and make light of these situations." But I just didn't feel like I could be myself 100%, or that I was really like listened to. And I think that's what's different about Metadent, is like it's a chill, good vibes space
Yeah.
for POC and queer folks and queer POC folks to really like just be themselves
Mm-hmm.
and not have to be like anything else and not have to explain, you know, who they are and what kind of background they come from.
Yeah.
And everyone that's come through my class has always been like, wow, I never knew I needed this.
I know it's different because I've taken classes at Magnet where the majority of my classmates were also white,
Yeah.
and so were the teachers. It's different. They might not get it where we're coming from.
It's a different kind of humor, I
Yeah.
think.
Like, what do you do differently to, as far as when the classes go, that's different, I guess, from like say Magnet or?
I would say one of the first things that people notice is I don't charge huge amount of fees, like half your rent or your whole rent for like one class. I get that like a lot of people in New York have crazy schedules. So if you can't commit to all 6 weeks,
Yeah.
that's okay for me. And I know for other improv schools, it's not okay for them. And if you drop 1 or 2 classes and you're out and you can't go back, or you have to start at level 1 again. And so for me, it was like, you know what, come whenever you can and join the group, right? And so, and I also have people pay on a sliding scale.
Yeah.
Whereas like Magnet and UCB is like, I don't know what it is now, but when I was there, it was like $800.
Jesus.
Yeah. And now I heard like it's $1,500 or something crazy like that.
Wow.
And I'm like, how can anyone except for like trust fund babies take improv at these classes or these schools?
Yeah.
So I've been really like intentional about creating a space that not only teaches people improv, but also allows their inner child to come out and play. So it's not just about you're going to be the next star in SNL.
Yeah.
It's really about just like organically having fun with other
I think that's
folks.
great because sometimes there's so much pressure. Like, where is this gonna take me?
Exactly.
Where am I gonna be seen? All that shit. It's really
it's
burdening.
very capitalistic way of teaching improv.
Yeah.
And it's like if you're good enough, you can go on to level 5, 6, and then you can be on our stage, and then you might be seen by Lauren Michaels, and it's like all kind of bullshit to me. Like, why does it have to be one man to tell us that we can do this stuff?
Yeah.
Right? And create and have a platform for our stories. So I really appreciate spaces like Metaden that like have a safe space for us to like do this.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, like, do you have a show at the end, like other?
So originally we were, but because everyone sort of drops in, I have like a core of like 4 or 5 who've been consistently coming for all the weeks, but I don't want to put pressure on, okay, we're going to have a show at the end and you all have to be really, really good, right? Because everyone's still a beginner. So, and then I think it also takes the fun out, right? So I'm wanting to do like a second level of improv class in the spring and offer it to folks who are like, okay, I'm ready to go deeper into improv.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So how long are these classes for?
About 6 weeks, and each class is 2 hours.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I want to share a random ass story
Okay.
real quick about like how you and I met. But so back in January, before you and I actually met, so I had just started this podcast, and I'm part of this group called Cosmos, which is for Asian American women, non-gender binary. So I had put my first episode out and asked for feedback. One of the people who gave feedback was Clarice Yale, and then she was like, "Oh, you should I know who you should talk to. You should talk to Nicole Maxali." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And I had looked you up. So that weekend was the weekend we actually met. I was at a sketch comedy for our sketch comedy show for our friend Helen. Yasmin was like, oh, she was all super dressed up. I'm like, oh, where are you going? She's like, I'm going to a friend's birthday party. Hey, you want to come? I'm like, yeah, sure. And then it turned out to be you. I was like,
so
get
crazy.
the fuck out of here. And then I messaged Khaleesi Yale the next day. I was like, yo, guess what happened? I think that's so meant to be. I was like, this is
so
crazy.
meant to be. And what's crazy even more is that she actually hit me up. I've never met her, right? She just follows me on Instagram because of Good Vibes. And so when after I met you, she hit me up. She's like, hey, I heard that you met Cindy Chu and she's an awesome podcaster. And that's so cool. And we've been like doing back and forth because she's an artist too. She does like cartoons and drawings, paintings. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. I coincidentally, well, not coincident, but I happened to be in San Francisco that following week. And there was something that was like, you should go to Japantown today. I was taking my nieces there because as a teenager, my parents used to take me there to Japantown. And so they had never been. And so I was like, okay, let me take you since this is like what I used to do as a teenager. And so I took them to Japantown, and the first person that I see is Clarice. And
Get
she's
the
like,
fuck out of here.
Nicole Maxali. And I was like, at first I was like, do I know this woman? And I don't remember who she is. And I was like, hi. You know those moments where like you totally can't, it doesn't click in your head, like, who is this person?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, is it someone I went to college with? Bindle step. I'm just like going through, and she goes, it's nice to finally meet you in person. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is the person I've been talking to on Instagram.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy? And I 100% believe in like the universe and law of attraction and manifestation. So like for her to like be at the same spot at the same time, and like I had no real plans. It was really just like, oh, what do you guys want to do? And my niece was like, whatever. And so I was like, I'm taking you to Japantown. It was so crazy. And now she's taking my course in
Is she
spring.
really?
Yeah,
Damn.
she just signed up.
That's awesome. Yeah. I definitely believe things like that. It's all meant to be like universe.
100%.
How did you get started in the industry, and what, pulled you in?
So I started acting, I want to say in high school, but as far as the industry, because we're Asian and my parents were like, well, my mom specifically was like, you can't be an actor, right? Because back when I was
surprised, because your mom, I met your mom. Oh,
yeah,
I was like, damn, she's very cool.
No, but she's very like type A. And being like a byproduct of like the immigrant struggle, right? Especially in San Francisco, it was like, well, we all came here for you to have a better life, and we don't want you to struggle as an actor, so don't do that, right? Get a like good job with a good degree to fall back on. So I went to college for broadcast journalism, and I worked for ABC7 for like 5 years in the newsroom, and I hated it. Like every moment I hated it. And I worked for the morning news. And it was really like the moment I made my hobby, because even though I was working for the news, I still like was part of Bindlestiff Studio, which is the only Filipino-American theater in the nation. And I would, volunteer my time acting, directing, writing in it. But it really wasn't until my father passed away in 2011 where I was like, you know what? Life is too short. You never know, because it was like so sudden. He died of a heart attack. No one knew. He was like 52 years old.
Wow, that's
and
young.
Yeah, and I'm 40, so that's like in 12 years, right? So I was like, if I don't know when I'm gonna die, I'd rather live not having any regrets than living for someone else's dream. Right? And that was my mom's dream, to be like me, be an anchor, a reporter. And so I quit my job, and I left everything I knew, and I left my apartment, and I moved here, and I was like, I'm just gonna do it.
Did you feel like it was a big gamble, or were you like, I trust this?
It was 100% a huge risk. And being Asian and being so close to my family was like, what am I doing, right? Like, why am I doing this? I didn't have any family out here. And so when I moved out here, I actually moved with a boyfriend at the time, but then we broke up, and I was like, crap, now I got to find my own place. I have to find a job. I had nothing. I didn't have an agent, anything. And so I was in depression because my dad had died.
Yeah.
So it took me a while, but I think after the second year of being here, something switched in my head, and I was like, you know what, just make the most of it and just do your thing. And so I applied to the New York Fringe Festival, and I did my one-woman show, which was about my dad and my grandma. And from that, I got an agent and a manager.
Nice.
Yeah, and that really got the ball rolling as far as like getting auditions, booking commercials, getting like one of the biggest acting gigs I've ever had in my life, and now I have fans all over the world.
Is this Kay?
Yeah.
Tell me about Kay. I have been hearing about it, because as your party, Yasmin was telling me something about it. I was like, what?
It's so weird and confusing. Yeah, I'm still like, what is this? So I think in 2014, I booked this weird comedic industrial sitcom that was going to be used to help people learn English. And so we spent a full year filming, and it turned out to be like 10 seasons. So it's 80 episodes.
Damn.
Each episode is half an hour, and I was the lead.
Wow.
So we shot almost every day except for the weekends, and every day I had to memorize, I would say, 7 to 15 pages
Jeez.
of script. And as an actor, you know, like, every day you have to be on top of it.
Yeah.
And it was like, I had no life for a year. I couldn't go out at night.
Was this here or is it?
It was here. Yeah, it was in New York. And so we filmed it. It was probably the toughest acting thing I'd ever had to do.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like acting Olympics.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and if you didn't have your lines memorized, the exact wording, enunciation, everything, people on set would hate you.
Oh my God.
Multiple people got fired.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And they had been in the episodes for a while, and they're like, she can't get her lines out.
Damn.
Next actor. It was like real.
That's
It's like,
cutthroat.
yeah, and that's what the industry is, though, right? Like, same thing on bigger projects with networks or, you know, Warner Brothers or studios.
Yeah.
If you are a pain in the butt or can't work with a director or can't get your lines memorized, unless you're like Brad Pitt, then
Your looks could get by.
right? Your power and looks can get by. But other than that, like, they're like, bye, see ya. Yeah.
Wait, so how did this get into a whole fandom thing? Like,
so
what happened?
they use this show. It's called Wall Street English. They use it now in 29 different countries to teach people English. And
Wow.
so they utilize the show, which is like just like a sitcom, like Friends or Big Bang Theory or something. And it's all in English. And they basically have workbooks and computer programs where they like check in with folks and like, okay, what did Kay do today? And write out what she did, or what were the struggles, what did her and her boss talk about. So then people are learning English. And so there's level like 1 to 80. And I get hit up on Instagram all the time, like, I love you, and you helped me learn English.
Aww.
And yeah, it's really sweet. And so I got to go on tour 2 years ago in South Korea, China, Hong Kong, Thailand, Vietnam, Paris. I went to Paris and met a lot of my fans. And
Wow,
it was
that's
pretty
crazy.
surreal to like be recognized at a Starbucks and
That's
people stopping me
crazy.
on the street like, are you okay?
Be like, yes, I am. Where, how do we find that? Can
Well,
people
it's
watch
not
it?
in America.
Oh,
That's the
okay.
tough part. Unless, I don't know if you have listeners in all different parts of the country.
Hopefully,
or-
eventually.
Yeah, in the world. But it's, like I said, in 29 other countries. So it's not here in America. I mean, you could probably find little clips on YouTube.
Wow.
But it's not the best writing or acting because
But
it's
it
supposed to be
works.
super simple. But yeah, I mean, it was a good project to learn
Yeah.
about set life and how to, especially as a lead character. I was one of 4 lead characters, and so it was a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't be sick. If you had a bad day, who cares? You have to just show
Wow.
up and do your work. Yeah.
We had talked about like you went from stand up, also you created a series, motivational speaking, and improv. Like what led from one thing to another?
I think, and what's funny is I actually watched Taika Waititi's TED Talk this morning, and he sort of encapsulated it perfectly, where he was a painter for most of his life. Like, he did fine art. And in his 30s, he finally decided, in acting, and then finally in his 30s, he played a stripper in some like random TV show in New Zealand, and he realized, I want to tell my own stories. And so I think for him, it was like he just wanted to create. And so he created in different mediums. And for me, I'm the same way. I feel like, yes, as an artist, you shouldn't be bound by just one box.
Yeah.
So I started off with acting, but being an actor, it's so limited, right? Because you're always relying on someone to be like, here's a role for you, or you should audition for this. And especially when I came up, it was like the early 2000s, way before Crazy Rich Asians, when it was only like Lea Salonga and Lucy Liu, right, on TV. So we had no one to look up to except for those 2. And so even my grandma was like, you can't be an actor because there's no Filipinos on TV. But now it's different, right?
Yeah.
Now it's different. But I decided, you know what? all these roles are super limited. I was either the girlfriend or the sexy girl or, you know, the car show girl or the nurse. I mean, I still am the nurse, but it was just so limited. And I was like, I want to start writing stuff where it really, like, shows my story and my capability as an actor, right? I don't have to always just be sexy or, you know, superficial. And so I started writing stand-up, and that's when I really started telling my own stories and getting to get out of my shell. And I've always had a love for comedy ever since I was a teenager. And so from stand-up, I went to one-person shows, got to take classes with W. Kamau Bell, and then from that, I went into film and web series. And so it was just like writing has always come, I wouldn't say easily, but it's something I love to do, and especially creating stuff for other folks, for them. So now I'm thinking like, oh, what scripts can I write for this person or that person, and mostly people of color. Yeah.
So how do you work on it in terms of like the material, whether it's stand-up or writing? Like, what's your process?
So I'm actually wanting to write a graphic novel, and I've never done that before. I had this idea for a short film when I was in the Philippines in September, and it's been an idea in my head, I don't know, for years, but it finally like came fully in September when I was visiting my grandma's hometown in the Philippines, where I'd never been before. And so when I was there, it came, and at first I was like, oh, I'll do a short film. I have a cousin who lives in Manila, and he was like, you could film a short film for under $2,000.
Get out.
Yeah, and it would be with a Red camera. It would include editing, like everything, because it's so cheap in the Philippines.
With like the production,
everything.
With the production company there?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, he was like, we can do it. He's like, we shot music videos, other short films, and he does stunts. He does stunt coordinating for films in the Philippines. He was like, I have a crew, we can do it. But then I was motivated and inspired by the most recent New York Comic-Con, and I got to meet Great POC and Marjorie Liu, who does Monstrous, and I was telling them about my idea, and they were like, oh yeah, you should totally do a comic or a graphic novel, because you're already in film, so you already see things visually, right? You already have that vision, so just take your script and make it into a graphic novel script. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing the research on how to do that, and I'm reading Greg Pak's book, How to Make Comics, which has been really helpful.
So do you draw or like?
No. I could, but I'm not very good at that. I would just write, and then I would find an illustrator to illustrate it for me. And Marjorie was like, you know, just worry about the script right now, and depending on the production house, they will actually match you with an illustrator.
What's the process? How do you even find a production house?
I have no idea. I'm still in the beginning stages and the research phase. And that's the thing about manifestation that I've learned with all the years of doing this. Don't worry about how am I going to find a production house, right? I'm not even there yet. Let me just finish the script, because I feel like once my script is done, that production house, the perfect one, will come in alignment with what my story is.
Yeah.
Because maybe it's not going to be Marvel or even Image. Maybe it's like a smaller boutique that like understands women of color and our stories and are super relevant to what we're going through right now with gentrification, decolonization, and like really understanding that that's what my story is going to be about.
So does your story take place in
the Philippines?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Is it about your family or?
It's inspired by my family, but it's also inspired by, I think, a lot of Filipino indigenous culture, and also what we call aswang, which is like supernatural creatures in the Philippines.
But is your family of indigenous in the Philippines?
I mean, technically all families are.
I'm trying to think, because my family's from Taiwan. I know that there's indigenous folks there too before like Chinese people came. So I'm curious how it is in the Philippines.
I think ancestrally we all come from indigenous roots, but because of colonization, like when I talk to my aunt, my grandma's sister, about it, she's so deep in the colonization that she sees like all that stuff as like Americans and Spanish are heroes, right? Because they've been like conditioned to think that. But ancestrally in our DNA, we all come from indigenous roots, right? It's just we've been colonized for so long that we forget about all that stuff. So that's the other part of the research, is to talk to folks who have all of that real connection. Because when you get the indigenous with the colonized, you get these like weird spiritual rituals, which is like Catholic, but also very not Catholic. But then they all believe it, right? It's very interesting to see the mix.
Yeah, that sounds like it.
Yeah.
This is not any of my questions. Would you be talking about like indigenous and then the mix of Catholic and indigenous beliefs?
Yeah.
That'd be super interesting to see, like,
Yeah.
I guess the different stages or like how that changes.
Yeah, and I also have been watching things like Watchmen.
Yeah,
on
I
HBO,
saw it. Yeah, it's really
and
good.
how they confront and talk about generational trauma and the beauty of how they took that graphic novel into film. And eventually I want to do that for my own graphic novel, is to make a series or a movie out of it. I could already see it, but I want to start doing it by a graphic novel because I think it could hit so many more people. Right. And even if I put it on the web for free, you know, then it's out there for folks. Because growing up, I never had a graphic novel about a Phil-Am girl, you know, or my heritage or my ancestors, you know. So I think just seeing what's out there, even on Instagram, and seeing the new artists, the Filipino-American artists who are out there doing like,
I was gonna say Ruby Ibarra. I saw her a couple of weeks ago performing here. She was so
she's
good.
dope. She's also which is where my grandma's from. Yeah, from the Visayas. So she's dope, and so that's why I want to do a project like that, and Good Vibes, because I want people like Ruby to be on the soundtrack, and
that'd be so
my girl
dope.
Krish, Rocky Rivera, and you know, her, and you know, all the Phil-Am folks that are doing their thing.
So tell us a little bit more about Good Vibes.
So Good Vibes is my web series. So far we've only done the pilot, but it's basically about 4 women of color. 2 are Filipino American in the Bay Area who are cannabis experts or in the cannabis industry.
How did it start, and from like beginning to end? I know there's so many like moving parts. How was it like personal to you? How'd you get the ideas, cast, crew, all that stuff?
So the idea actually sparked when I was high with an ex-boyfriend like 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I told him the idea, and this is why you should never like tell your ideas to people who aren't safe, right? Because
what happens?
He was just like, that's not gonna work. You know, and he just like poo-pooed on it, and I was like, okay, forget it. So then I forgot about it for like 10 years.
Damn.
And then I happened to meet the co-director, Jocelyn Rose Lyons, at a show, and she was like, oh, let's meet up and have lunch and talk about different projects that we're working on. And so in our meetup, she was like, what stuff have you written? And I told her, and then I told her my Good Vibes idea, and she was like, oh, that's really interesting. Why don't you like write a script or like a short and then send it to me, and we'll see if we can get it made. And so I sent it to her, and she's like, this is so dope. I would really love to help with directing it. And so she sent it to her friend, but then her friend in LA wanted $60,000.
Damn.
I know. And I was like,
to direct it?
No, to produce it.
Jesus Christ.
Right?
who has that money for an indie
I'm like,
shoot?
I'm not a trust fund kid.
Damn.
Like, I literally like grew up on welfare. So like, I was like, I don't have 60 grand just laying around, you know, and I'm not willing to put it on my credit cards, you know, for something for what? Like, is she even guaranteeing distribution? No. It was just like, we'll get it made, and then that's it. So I talked to my cousin about it, because she's one of my mentors, and she's worked in the film industry for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. She worked for Lucasfilm. And I was like, what do you think? And she's like, send me the script. Let me see it. So I sent her the script, and she was like, oh, me and my production company can do it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I was like, okay. She's like, you don't have to give us any money. We'll partner with another production company that will fund it, and then we will both produce it for you. And then you'll just have to co-direct, and you'll be in it. And so I And I also helped with the production. So I like found the location, I casted all the characters, and that was a struggle because I thought, oh yeah, Bay Area, there's like mad Filipinos here. Like
Yeah.
I'll just pick my friends. And the characters are very specific to the kind of Bay Filipino that I was thinking,
Mm-hmm.
or Bay Latina, and like no one in the Bay could like hit it.
Really?
Yeah, I was so surprised. And so I couldn't find it. So finally I had to cast from folks in LA. But what happened was that one of the, Christine, who plays Max, she's
Mhm.
actually from Vallejo, but she lived in LA. So she
I'm
got
not familiar with Cali. Like, where's Vallejo?
Okay, so Vallejo's part of the Bay Area.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a northern part of the Bay Area. But LA is like all the way SoCal.
Yes.
And so she had moved to LA, but she got the casting notice and she auditioned on tape.
Mhm.
And so I saw her tape and I was like, she's Max. Like, she's 100% what I thought of when I wrote up Max.
Yeah.
Which is like a hodgepodge of different Bay folks that I know, but who aren't actors, right?
Mhm.
They're just themselves. And so I cast her as Max. And then Elena I found because she was actually living in San Francisco, but she's from New York. And so I was like, okay, cool. She's perfect as Star. And then the last piece of the puzzle was her mother, right? And who is based on my godmother, who's Mexican.
Mhm.
And for the longest time, I couldn't find someone who was like 50s, 60s, but still like down to smoke a fake joint.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so finally, I just casted my friend Sarita, who's younger than me, but her like the way you could put makeup on her, she could morph into any character. So it was like everything aligned perfectly. And that's what's beautiful about manifestation is that I can use this within film and every project that I do. So really it's just trusting the universe and trusting the process and that what you want will come to you and those people will find you.
How is the process in terms of like co-directing?
So co-directing was really interesting because originally I just wanted Jocelyn to direct all of it. But the day of, there was like a disconnect in communication. And this was a big lesson for me, right? And so there's a disconnect in communication. And so I ended up having to direct the actors. And she was more like on the crew side.
Just curious, like miscommunication in what way?
In just like our expectations for each other on set on the day of. And so she was more focused on how things were lit and camera angles and things like that. And I was more focused on, okay, are the jokes hitting? You know, are the actors saying it exactly how the timing has to be? Because with comedy, timing is everything. And so is delivery.
Yeah.
Right. And like, we all bonded fairly quickly and we still like are really good friends, all of us actresses. And so that wasn't a problem. The chemistry was never a problem, but it was just like hitting certain jokes, right? And punching things up and improving too and giving space to improv. And so after the final cut, you kind of see that there is some kind of disconnect. I know you saw it. So I don't know if you noticed that, but there was a note from someone in the industry that was like, who directed this? And you can see that there's some kind of, there's something missing in it. But when I premiered it, everyone loved it. A lot of folks came up to me and was like, yo, I'm from the Bay, and this really reminded me of home. It was so awesome to see on the big stage, on the big screen. And so many people were happy with it, especially people from the Bay, that the final product for me was like exactly what I wanted.
Yeah.
So to me, overall, it was like a great experience, and I learned a lot.
Have you done something like that before? Or like, how did you know what to do? You know?
I've directed theater. I never directed film before, so that was actually my first time directing on film. But as far as like being on set, I've done a ton of set work as an actor, but never as a director. So to like work with the actors was fine because I've done that again in theater. But as far as like being behind Video Village and seeing, you know, the shots, I didn't get to do that because Jocelyn was the one behind seeing all the shots. So I think moving forward, I would like to be able to do that and maybe not cast myself as one of the leads.
Yeah.
to like have that eye and have the ability to like call out, okay, hold on, you're not hitting that, or that needs to be said in this way, or you know, and not helping the actors find their character a little bit more.
What about in terms of like logistics, from pre-production and then post-production? How did you navigate that? Or how did you know what to do, what to expect?
So the pre-production, I think, was a huge team effort. So I had another producer, Scott, who helped with getting all the crew, and he was huge in that the crew that he got, they were stupendous. They came all the way from LA. And with their own equipment. So we had a whole truck of like lighting equipment, and, you know, we had a grip, a gaffer. We had, you know, the AD who later on worked on The Last Black Man in San Francisco and is doing huge things now. And our cinematographer, Nick, he's amazing too. He's on tour with, I forget the rapper's name, but one of the big rappers. He did a tour with Macklemore too. And so they all came fully experienced, right? If anything, I was the one with the least experience, but all these people believed in this show, and they believed in the script. And so I think that was really, it was a blessing, right? Because you had my cousin who worked for Lucasfilm, you had these producers who've done huge, big budget movies, right? Who funded huge things like $1 million movies, and everyone was believing in me. And so it was really, I think, one of the most challenging things was to get out of my imposter syndrome, right? I think, especially as a woman of color, you think, oh, you're not good enough because you didn't go to UCSF, or not UCSF, USC, you didn't go to, you didn't go to, you know, Columbia, you didn't go to NYU film
And it's
school.
okay, like we don't have to.
And you don't have
don't
to.
have to.
Look at Taika Waititi, you know, like, again, I go back to him because he's amazing and I really dig his comedy style and his writing, but like he just started doing film 10 years ago, and it started with a short film, right? And that's the same thing here. Essentially, it was like a short film.
Yeah.
It's one of my first film productions. So to see what I was able to do with like literally nothing, but to have a team that was so amazing and so on point and so talented, like get behind me and my idea, was really like, I think, a reminder to me that don't worry about the inexperience that you have or feeling not good enough. Just worry about getting your story out.
How did you deal with that when you were feeling the imposter syndrome?
I think it was really important for me, and this is what I teach in my course too, is to stay grounded, right? And remind yourself every day, even if it's like through an affirmation or meditation or even just praying, that you're here for a reason, that even if you don't 100% believe in yourself, that other people believe in you, right? And you got to just show up, and you got to do 110%. You know, and I think that was another thing that was hard, was I had someone on set not really doing their job, and then later on when I called them out on it, they were like, well, you know, my 50% is like better than most people's 100. And I was like, okay, there's no room for ego like that in like a film crew, right? Because everyone is showing up with 100% or 110, and I feel like if you're not showing up with 110, then you're doing a disservice not just to everyone else but to yourself in the project. And so, like, unfortunately, I had to like cut ties with that person, right? But moving forward, it really solidified the fact that a film crew is a team, and everyone has a really important job. No one's job is more important than anyone else's, because it's a team effort. It's a family. And if you all believe in this one project, or even if you don't believe in the project, but you're hired to do a job, you have to show up. No matter what. You have to be professional.
Definitely. What about in terms of like post-production? I love the music and the edits. And how did you come up? Oh, you have to see the teaser, people. But how did you come up with like the editing phase? How did you know what specific look, you know?
So, I actually had Scott and my EP, Ardis, had a connection to our editor, who's Josh, And he's just amazing. He's done stuff with James Franco, right? He's edited all of James Franco's movies, independent movies. And so I trusted him. And that's what I feel like he should also get a co-director title, I think. Most editors do a lot of the work.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like he lives in LA. So it wasn't, does he live? Yeah, I think he lives in LA. And so it wasn't like I could fly down and be with him in the editing room and be like, okay, this shot, that shot, this shot. It was really like trusting his process and trusting that he had the eye, because he was on set with me too. So that is also a blessing, because most editors won't take the time to be on set, right? So he understood like what we were going for in the beginning. He understood even like the graphics that he used for each character. Did you see that part where
when it freezes?
Yeah, it freezes. That was in my vision like a year before we shot, right? That exact kind of stats and the way they like moved and all that stuff. And so he beautifully put that together without really little communication to him. I just sent him like a website, which is leafly.com, that like talks about weed strains. And I was like, something like this. And he beautifully put it together, and he like popped people out when they needed to. And he added the music. And sometimes I'd be like, okay, actually I wanted this song or this feel for this. So he was able to work with me in a way that was like seamless. And that's the other thing, is like when you put something out there, I think in the universe helps to bring whatever the person experience or thing that will help be in alignment with what you wanted and your intention. And he was 100% in alignment with what I wanted for this project. Yeah.
So how did it work? Like you and the other co-director would send notes and then go back and forth from that?
I just sent notes. Yeah.
What about in terms of like when you work with sound design and color correction? Like how did that work?
So for him, he did a like an overall color correction, and then I'd be like, well, I'm feeling more along lines of like Atlanta or whatever. You know, I would give them, we had a pitch deck beforehand that we share with the entire crew, and I was like, these are our inspirations for what kind of show we want this to be.
Yeah.
And so I think we did the best we could on what was shot, but I think I actually would have wanted it more, not as clean. Because it still kind of seems a little bit sitcom-y to me, but I want it more like single camera, like, Atlanta, and I don't want to say Louis C.K., but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know.
Like girls, okay? I don't know. It's so hard to like say shows that aren't like problematic.
I know. I'm like, what's another one?
Where are the person of color shows that aren't problematic? Master of None. Z said sorry. I don't know. But like, it came out more, I think, like Insecure.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to look too much like Insecure. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, like having your own look.
Yeah.
But having inspiration.
Exactly.
Feel you.
Yeah.
So would you be doing a second episode, do you think?
So we're in talks right now, and I know that's one of your questions, the little question thing, but I'm not really allowed to say. Okay. But we're pitching to streaming networks.
Nice.
Yeah. Once we pitch, we just see who has the best deal, and then the streaming network will help us with distribution and also production for the full season.
Nice. How do you even go about that process to find people to pitch to?
So that's where I rely on my executive producers in my production companies, which is Colorful Media and Caravara Films. So those two companies have helped, one with gaining the crew and the finances needed to produce this, but also they have the connections to the streaming networks, the studios, the people that need to be pitched to. And that's the other thing. It's like really kind of letting go of your baby and allowing the universe to do its magic, right? And trusting your EPs and trusting your producers. Believe me, there's times where I'm like, it's been a year, nothing's happened.
It's a long ass time.
It's a long time, but if you really think about it, Dave Chappelle did, I don't know, more than a dozen pilots, and only the Chappelle Show was the one that got picked up, right? So I think I'm at the stage right now where it's like I did what I had to do as a creator, writer, and co-director for this piece, and when it gets picked up, it's going to be amazing, but I'm not going to rely all my success and happiness on this one project. So that's why I'm now focusing on my graphic novel. I'm focusing on Raise Panay, which I'm doing this spring. I'm focusing on so many other projects. I think it's dangerous for creatives especially to just focus on one project and think, oh, when I get this, or when I sell this, or when I make it with this, then I'll be happy, because then you'll never be freaking happy, right? And then you're just relying and you're putting your power in one thing.
I'm sure like life is different now than when you first got here to New York. So what's been your support system now?
Oh my gosh, 100%. When I first got here, I had just broken up. I was depressed. I was working 3 jobs that I all hated. I was a waitress, I was a hostess, and I was working some temp job. And so now I think I really took the time to do all the inner work needed to find the happiness within me, right? But the support system I have now is one, like I said, Metaden, which is huge game changer for me. Like, I found a community, right? And a community to flourish in. And I think that's what was missing for me in New York for so long was I came from Bindle's Studio, which was like a huge incubator for Filipino American art. And not just actors and writers, but everything from stand-up. I used to take stand-up classes there, and that's how I started doing stand-up, for producing, for stage management, for everything, even puppetry and shadow puppetry. So coming from that space in the Bay where like there's so many Asians and so much community and family, and then coming here where it's like there's so many people, but each person is like its own island.
Yeah.
Right? We get so
That's
lonely
New York.
in New York. And like people don't get that from outside of New York. So finally finding a community of folks where it's like I have a community of Panays that I can like create with. I have a community of POCs who are like non-binary, queer, like super like healing. And then I have like now my husband, right, who has been a huge support system for me in New York. And we just got married a year ago. So like this is really recent for me, right, being married and having this person who is now my partner and 100% my #1 fan since day one. And it's really been game changing to have all those 3 things here in New York, because New York can freaking break you.
Yeah. Other than Metaden, like where did you find these groups of people?
It was really through Filipino connections, right? Because I found Metaden through my homegirl JL, who is a healer, a writer. She does tarot. She's a teacher. She does all these things, director, and she's the one who started Raise Panay. And because of Raise Panay, we did rehearsals at Metaden. So it was really just putting myself out there and allowing folks that I know to introduce me to their communities.
What would you say that you do to keep improving and moving forward?
I love taking classes. I love taking workshops. I think the first 30 years of my life was just like workshop mode, whether it's like sketch or improv or acting. And no matter like how long I've been acting, I still want to go back to an acting class, right?
Yeah.
Because in all honesty, when you're an artist, you always have to be like dedicated to your art and your craft, right? And my dad taught me that. He was a painter and a musician. And if you want to get better, you just got to show up every day and practice. And what better way, for me at least, is to have a place where you show up and you're accountable to someone.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about classes or workshops, is that if I didn't have those things, I would maybe not have the pressure to be so good or do the work or, write something on deadline, right? And so like it's still taking me a while as far as like my graphic novel, because I have no one to be accountable to except myself, right? But I know now, like, and this is kind of silly, but with coronavirus and like all the crazy things that are happening, I'm like, shit, I might as well just start writing now in case I die of coronavirus. Then at least the story's out there.
At least.
It's morbid, but I don't know. That's how my messed up mind works sometimes.
Gotcha. Which acting classes do you take, or like?
So I actually haven't taken an acting class in New York in a really long time. I'm actually looking for one. But what's hard about my life right now is I travel so much. So like I'm gone half like every other month I'm gone, whether it's like speaking or meeting my fans for Wall Street English or teaching my workshop in churches or whatever. So I actually haven't been here consistently to take a class. So I can't actually answer that question. You probably know better classes than I do right now.
It's been a minute too since I took an acting
But I would
class.
love to take another acting class.
What's something that you wish you knew about the industry before you got started, or even before you moved to New York? You know, things like that.
One of the things that I heard from one of my mentors early on was do things more for yourself. And I think coming into, especially with my pilot and where I am right now, and even just coming back from the Philippines and realizing that Hollywood is super capitalistic and they don't care about you, right? No one cares about you. It's just a money-making machine, right? And so I think when you go into the industry, you have to be really good with yourself. And you have to define what success is for you. Don't let anyone define that for you, right? Because if you do, you'll never be happy. And I think for a long time, I allowed other people outside of me to do that. And now I'm doing shit for myself. Sorry, I didn't mean to swear.
Nah, we're like that.
Okay. And so now I'm actually doing stuff for me that makes me excited and me passionate, and stuff that I want to see or would have liked to see when I was 16. And so I think if it aligns with what corporate media wants, fine. But if it doesn't, I'm also okay with that. So again, I think when I was younger, I would probably just knowing if you're not a corporate artist, that's okay too. Like, your success doesn't really have to rely on if you get an Oscar or, you know, if someone, you know, Warner Brothers hires you to write something, a DC movie or whatever, right? But really define success for yourself early on and be good with, like, who you are. And don't try to change who you are for anyone. Because that's not going to work.
Word up. Okay, and last question, what's your advice for those like starting on acting, writing, graphic novels, directing, anything?
Really learn your crafts. I had a friend who was like, he's a DJ, but he was like, I want to start acting. And I was like, okay, have you taken classes? He was like, no. No. I was like, have you acted? No. I just wanted to do this. And I think with our consciousness in our society right now, especially with Instagram and social media, I think it's really easy to be like, oh, this person's doing it, or, you know, this influencer can do that, so I can just do it, which is great, but it's a double-edged sword. I think me being old school and really taking the time, like freaking 30, 40 years to know my craft, really it's like, well, yes, but you also have to respect the art form. Right. So if you're interested in acting, if you're interested in writing, if you're interested in directing, take a class. Really learn from people who have the experience. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to listen to everything they say as like a rule or, you know, as concrete, but like allow it to inspire you and really like gain some knowledge within that and really find yourself in this art form. Because if you don't and you just kind of like go with your ego and be like, I don't need that, then I don't know, it's like you're not really being authentic and you're not really showing that art form respect. And I think that's really, for me at least, like have integrity with your artistry.
This wraps up our episode. Thank you so much to Nicole for coming through. Where can our audience find you?
So they can find me on Instagram, Nicole Maxali, and I'll spell that because it has an X in it. It's Nicole, M as in Mary, A-X, like X-Men, A-L-I.
Cool. And this episode of Creative Queens Podcast is presented in partnership with Listening Party. Follow the crew on Instagram at Listening Party Presents and at Canal Stream Market. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, and wherever y'all listen to podcasts. And follow us at Creative Queens Podcast on Instagram. Thanks, y'all.
Yay.
Yeah.